It's just something, that another one of those things that's like, okay, this is how my brain works based on the experiences and things that I have gone through and things that have happened to me. Now, what can I do?
Hey guys, welcome to our SoulFam Podcast, where I interview space holders from all over the world. I'm your host, my name is Karolina, and I am the Connection Catalyst. I help spiritual entrepreneurs experience deeper connection with themselves, with others, and with the whole universe. Today on the show, we have Karla Houston, the mental health freelance writer. Welcome to the show, Karla. How are you doing?
Hi, thank you. I'm doing great. How are you?
I am doing really, really good because I'm super excited to talk to you because I know that you are a very, very rich person and you have a lot of wisdom inside in a lot of ways and a lot of topics. So I'm super, super happy that you agreed to be on the podcast. And yeah, I'm super, super happy to talk to you today. So I would love to start with a little bit of a backstory of yours to discover like what was your journey, how you came to be a mental health freelance writer because I guess that mental health was a big theme in your life. And I'm really curious about how it all started for you. What inspired you to become a writer? And how did your journey develop until this day?
Absolutely. So I've been writing since I was a kid. It's always been a passion of mine, from short stories to just personal entries to share with people just what's on my mind and cultivate from my perspective of things. And as I got older, I continued with it, but I decided to go the route of education and I became a teacher. And then a couple of years ago, when the pandemic hit, I found out I was pregnant. So I stopped teaching and decided to pick up again with my writing and start sharing more on Instagram because I kind of fell into a bit of post or prenatal depression. And that was kind of something that I used to really uplift my mood, and that turned into me being able to get picked up by different publications online and just guest blog or ghostwrite. And now I am an official mental health freelance writer. So I absolutely love it.
Wow, that's amazing. That's great that you used your passion and your joy to actually share with people. And I feel like that's the best way to do this because when you are actually coming from joy and from passion and from something that excites you and you're doing it for you, then people can really feel it and they can really pick up on this energy that you put, that intention that you put in your writing, in your passion. So that's really, really great. I love that. It's really, really inspiring. And thank you so much for sharing. And so I know that mental health is a big, big topic, and we can probably talk about it for hours. And I would love to actually talk about some maybe truths and myths that you have discovered on your journey about the mental health. And I would love to start with the topic of bipolarity because I know I saw in some of your in one of your posts on Instagram that you have been diagnosed in 2016, from what I remember. And I would like to really just break this myth because as I said to you before we started recording, that I don't really believe in labels so much. I believe that we are just different people, and like because there is a norm, right, that we need to fit into, then anything beyond the norm is like labeled, and this is not normal, and this is like, but first of all, who the hell decides what's normal, and like where does the norm actually end and where does it start? Because to me it's like, all these kind of different mental health conditions, to me, like when I, for example, meet people with ADHD or with autism, sometimes these people are geniuses. Like honestly, sometimes their brain works in a way that I'm like, oh my god, how can this person even like comprehend these things? And their brain just works differently. And so I really do not believe in, these kind of labels and so on. And so I'm really curious about your perspective and how you went about, what was your journey when you were labeled like this, and how did you manage it internally, and also how do you stay grounded in all this mess that, that collective consciousness puts on you? Oh, bipolarity, oh, it's like this or that. And what are really the truths and the myths around, about this let's say state? Because yeah, I just really I just really don't believe in labels. So I'm here to just bring some light of consciousness onto these themes. So I'm really curious about your perspective.
Of course. And I really appreciate you even asking and bringing this kind of topic to your platform because I think it's really important. And I can definitely agree with you when it comes to labels. Being diagnosed in 2016 was a shock with bipolar 2. So there's four different types of bipolarity that are listed. Bipolar 1, 2, there's one that I cannot pronounce that starts with a C, and then there's undefined. And so 2 is more inclination of depression, more so than the stereotypical violent, or you're going to start going from hot to cold that we normally see depicted in the media. And so knowing that, I as well don't believe in labels. I view the diagnosis as an explanation, not an excuse. So I know I can better understand how my brain is working. And so knowing that I have this going on, it helps me even function better. Now that I finally understand that, okay, certain things might trigger me, certain things might push me into a different space than normal, you could say, or average. I just have to be extra on top of what needs to be done to help prevent that. So things that I normally keep in my, toolbox include meditation, affirmations, exercising, hiking, getting my body moving at least once a day, if I have downtime or if I have an active day, because that keeps the serotonin levels in my brain high versus just having to depend on a medication. And there's nothing wrong with taking medication. And sometimes I do that myself, but it's not my preference. So I try to do everything as natural or as holistic as possible because it's easier for me. I've learned over these last 6 years, it helps me to better function the way that I desire. Having the label, I share about being bipolar online because I want to break that stigma. I don't believe that it defines who I am. I'm not the disorder. I have it, but it doesn't have me. And so it's really kind of when you mentioned people that have autism, ADHD, and how they're geniuses, I kind of feel like bipolarity gives me a little bit of a superpower because I have this just mentality sometimes, or mindset that's not so common, and I can see things in ways that others may not, and I'm able to bring light to that and show them, because of this disorder, because of this chemical imbalance in my brain. And at first it was really hard. It took a while to get here. It took about almost a full 6 years to really understand, like, okay, this is something that is incurable. This is something that is not going to go away. And so how am I going to be able to live my life the way I want to while having this disorder? And I just decided that I'm going to do everything I can, from, like I mentioned, activities that I know will help, from therapy and just having a support system in my friends and loved ones to know that, okay, I got this, and it's been a really intense, sometimes tough, but beautiful journey. And I wouldn't regret, I wouldn't take back anything if I could do it all over again, because I feel like every single step has led me to become the woman that I needed to in this chapter of my life.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. I really love how you talk about it, and I'm really curious to know, like, from your perspective, because I don't know, I cannot even comprehend or imagine how the brain works with this kind of, let's say, state. Because I don't want to say diagnosis or this kind of like ailment, because I don't believe it's like an ailment. I believe it's like a, yeah, like you say, a superpower. It's just different. So
Yeah.
how does it work in terms of like what is the thing that is going inside of you? What is it going on?
Mhm.
Is it that you have, for example, different thoughts or different feelings at once, or like how does it actually play out in your body?
Yeah, so for me, what ultimately got me diagnosed originally in 2016 was the fact that I was just struggling with keeping my emotions balanced. I couldn't regulate the right way. I would get really irritable or anxious, and I had a hard time in school studying, or when I started working, getting through my workday was just harder than it should have been. And so when I started going to therapy and talking to my therapist at the time, they brought up the diagnosis and decided that this might be something that I actually have based on the way I was describing it, and how I just couldn't seem to find anything to help me be able to get to what I was used to internally. So I went from feeling really balanced emotionally to up and down throughout the day, unprompted. Nothing had to happen. I could be at Disneyland, I could be having the best day ever, and then all of a sudden I would just feel a dark cloud over me. And I was like, I can't live like this. This is not normal. I was around, positive, happy people. I was not familiar with this mental diagnosis or really mental health in general. It was something that I had dealt with since I was a child, but I had suppressed it. And I just thought, okay, if I ignore it, it'll go away. And I think ignoring it ultimately, obviously, didn't help because it just grew. And the issue of the moods up and down continued for me. And also, on top of having the bipolar diagnosis, I was recently diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. And so it kind of goes hand in hand with the up and down moods. And sometimes for me, sometimes just like anyone else in the world, you can have feelings of abandonment. You can feel anxious, you can feel worried, and sometimes I can tend to lean into that thinking if I don't do my typical routine of management when it comes to my emotions. I can tend to just spiral, into this thought process that is just ultimately leading to something that could be very detrimental. A lot of people who are bipolar struggle with suicidal ideation. I am one of them. And so it's not that I have an actual plan to take my life, even though in the past I have had multiple attempts that I have seen now have been related to the disorder. But more so, it's like feeling like you just don't need to be here anymore, or feeling like the world would just be better without you. And that's just part of the chemical imbalance. And so, knowing that, I have to constantly remind myself, sometimes every single day for a month straight, that this is not true. This is not fact. I have to remind myself what is fact, go through sometimes even after a conversation with someone, if I take it the wrong way because of my own wiring in my brain, I have to go back through the list and say, okay, what do we know is fact? Did they tell you this? Yes or no? Yes. Okay. No. Okay. Move forward, and sometimes that's just a practical thing that I use because of what I have to go through in order to continue to be who I want to be. And I accept that. And so part of the diagnosis is, like you were saying with labels, I get it. It's a label. It's a definition, it's an explanation, but it's not me. So I take it as I'm bipolar. Okay, I might be written down as borderline personality, but I'm still me. And I'm still going to be able to be me even amidst these diagnoses. I just have to keep doing these practical tools that I have in my box and I'll be fine. And I feel like that is something that has really helped me throughout these, like I said, 6 years, and even in the most recent diagnosis in the past couple of months, of just knowing that even if I get another one, it's just an explanation of how my brain works, but it doesn't define who I am.
Mm, yeah, that's really really spot on. I really vibe with it because like yeah, it's just something that can help you understand yourself on a deeper level. But what are you gonna do with it? Then it is like the most
Right.
important thing, I guess. And I'm really curious because
Yeah.
like to me it just seems like okay, bipolarity. It's a label, but to me it seems like okay, everyone has emotions, so maybe just the bipolar people, let's say, I don't know how to, or people with diagnosis like this, they just have maybe a different mechanism subconsciously of dealing with it or just going into extreme emotions. But it's to me it seems like it's all stemming from childhood trauma anyway. Like if you
Yes.
heal the emotions, if you express them, then you're not going to have such
Hmm.
extreme variations of emotions. And I work with people with the subconscious mind, going back to childhood traumas, releasing emotions and so on. And I know that like when you go back and you really relive all these emotions, a person who might be very very stressed and constantly chronically fatigued or stressed or whatever, at some point they can be at peace. And it's not like okay, you have chronic fatigue, you have chronic stress, everything is able to be healed if you just put a lot of
Yes.
focus and attention into it, if you go back and you really rewire that. Because honestly I believe that emotion is energy in motion. So if you have some kind of states, like even the victimhood or hopelessness or whatever, powerlessness, it's still the energy that is inside of you. So to me it seems like if you actually can deal with this energy and let yourself express it in a healthy way and regulate your nervous system
Right.
and be conscious about it all, it seems like yeah, maybe you need to pay a little bit more attention. But everyone has emotions and everyone goes with the program subconsciously, and everyone sometimes goes way beyond with their reaction of what logically makes sense because of the trigger, because of the childhood trauma. So it
Yes.
just seems to me like maybe bipolar people are more sensitive to changes, in a way, to emotional
Absolutely.
changes, but it doesn't mean that it cannot be healed. Like, I don't believe that there is something that cannot be healed. I believe that it's all wiring in your brain, it's all your
Hmm.
body. Like, your body has the ability to heal. So if you know how to approach it, and you use different methods, and you treat yourself holistically, I honestly believe that almost anything can be healed. Like, I don't say everything because I don't know, but I honestly believe that, or at
Yes,
least mitigate it massively, if you
a
just work with
majority.
emotions, if you know. Yeah, exactly. If you work with the
Right.
breathing, maybe if you need to regulate yourself, if you work with, as you say, affirmations and movement, and you surround yourself with amazing people and so on, then I believe, like, okay, maybe you have some ups and downs emotionally, but honestly, everyone does. Like, maybe for
Right.
you, they are more extreme, but like, I believe that everyone needs to work on their emotions. There is no person that
Yep.
should not work on their emotions in life, right? So I believe it's like,
Right.
okay, maybe you're just more sensitive, more extreme, in this, but I believe it's something you can mitigate, at least, if not heal, in my view. But that's just my intuition telling me that. So
No, yeah,
I
I
might be completely
absolutely
wrong,
agree.
but yeah,
Yeah.
that's great.
No, I
That's great that we
absolutely
agree.
agree with you. Yeah. I was going to
Amazing.
mention that. I was going to mention that from my most recent diagnosis and the bipolar diagnosis, that both were stemmed from my therapist who, after talking through my own childhood trauma and things that I went through, I'm honestly convinced that if you want to give it a name, one of my parents would have had the same thing. And it's just a cycle of generational trauma and hurt that never got healed. And so that's why I think on my page, I might have in my bio, I'm a cycle breaker, because now that I know what's going on, I don't have to continue passing it down to my daughter. I don't have to keep it, in my family. It stops with me. And that's why I'm extremely thankful that I put in the time to even discover what was going on with my brain, because now that's where the true healing begins. Like you mentioned, the rewiring and the unlearning and the relearning. I absolutely believe that anything can be healed in that way.
Yes, amazing. That's really empowering. That's really, really cool that you believe that. Me too, seriously, because we're not here to suffer. We're here to heal. We're here to grow. We're here to expand and to experience life. And if we have something that we struggle with, it's usually just the universe pushing us on the path to healing so that we can share it with others and improve our lives. So I totally believe that. And I'm really curious, because you said that there are different levels of bipolarity. So how are they different? Like the one, two, three, four, like what is the
Hmm.
difference between them?
So the one that I have, like I mentioned, is more so for manic depression, which is bipolar 2. Bipolar 1 is more of like a up and down state where you might feel like a violent urge or a little bit more irritability. You might struggle to feel like more of the switch between your brain, and you might have, moments where you're just up and you're great and everything's fine. And then literally a minute later, you're crashing, and that's why I wasn't necessarily diagnosed with that one, because I don't really show symptoms of that one. There's then another one that is, I believe, cyclocomythic. I cannot say it, but it's more so where you have a cross between 1 and 2. So you might show symptoms of bipolar 1 and bipolar 2. So they named it a different one just to define that. And then there's another one that's just undefined. So that's the fourth one. It's just they haven't named it. It's unspecified, but you show like markers that you're on the bipolarity spectrum, but they're not exactly sure where to place you. And that's why I am firmly, like you said, not a true believer in labels, because it's more so just a definition. But if you label it and then you tell me, hey, there's a possibility that you're not this, then I'm attached to this label. And that can be really traumatic for some people sometimes, because they identify with something that doesn't necessarily have a permanent standing. So that's why I think it's
Mhm.
important to know the difference and the definitions between each types, so that you can understand that right now, maybe you're on this, bipolar 2 spectrum, or you're showing signs of bipolar 1, but you won't have to stay there. You can work through the whatever it is that you need for medicine or therapy, or working out, doing yoga, unlearning and relearning. And then when you go back a couple months later or a year later or whatever it is, you may not even be showing symptoms of that anymore. So that's why I think it's important to know all four and make sure you're fully educated on that, so that you can understand, okay, I was feeling this way, but now I'm not. So, yeah.
Hmm. That's amazing. And it's pretty funny that, like, okay, you are undefined. And it's like, okay, we want to define you. So we're just going to define you as undefined.
Right.
It's like, what the hell?
Exactly.
I mean, that
Yeah.
doesn't make any
Yeah.
sense. So, yeah,
Right.
you're bipolar, but undefined. So we cannot really define you, but we're going to define you as bipolar. It's like, uh?
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I just
exactly.
find it really, really funny. And that just tells everything about labeling, because it's like it's just a funny, it's just a
Exactly.
joke as
Yeah,
I
it
think.
can be.
And so, what do
Mhm.
you think is the most important thing that people should know who maybe know someone bipolar? And in terms of like, if someone has, let's say, a switch next to them, or let's say I have a friend or my mom or partner or whatever who is bipolar, how do I go about it then? Like, what do I need to understand? What is the most important thing to understand? And how to maybe behave in a situation where someone is really emotional and really goes on the, I don't know, these ups and downs, or on the sinusoid of emotions. What is the
Yeah.
advice that you would give to someone like that?
I would say that if you know someone like that, you should definitely talk with them and have a safety plan, as I call it, so that when they have episodes or mood shifts, you know how to help de escalate them or help them come out of that way of thinking. And if they can't, you need to know how to keep yourself safe as well, so that you're not intermixed with this episode because it could potentially turn violent, or it could turn just, spiral into a really uncomfortable situation that might trigger you, and you need to keep yourself safe as well. So I always tell people my husband has gone to therapy. He has gone to different classes to specifically learn how to assist being as a partner, as a spouse of someone who has this disorder, and that has definitely helped him a lot. I know everyone may not be able to do that, but if you can get some kind of resource in that way, I highly recommend it, because there's just so many different factors to bipolarity that we can tend to take personal when we don't have it, and that is not helpful for someone that does have it, because they really, in that moment when they're having an episode, need your support. So if you could just, use soft words, try not to escalate it with yelling, or sometimes touching is an issue because it can throw off a sensory balance when they're having episodes. I know I have that as well. So sometimes I just need to be left alone. And if you know that, just give them some space, whether it's 30 minutes, whether it's an hour. If you need to leave and come back, or if they need to leave and come back, let them, because sometimes that's the only thing that's going to truly help de escalate that situation. As well, I would say after they come out of that episode, talk to them about, what can I do to better support you? What are things that I can do to help you specifically that you want me to do when those things happen? And I always tell people to tell your partner, tell your friend, tell your parent, this is how I feel when you have these episodes, because it's not an excuse. So sometimes people like to use this mental health diagnosis as justification for just being, rude, being inconsiderate, being mean, being violent, and that's not okay. So if that does happen, I always say make sure you just say, so just so you know, sometimes when you're having these episodes, I feel a little uncomfortable, or I feel like I am being attacked and I want to help. So is there any way that we can have like maybe a word that prompts you to remember that I'm here to assist you versus be against you? And having those like really basic but powerful conversations can definitely help prevent a lot of these episodes in the future. And so I think that's also important to keep in mind as well. The goal is to keep everything balanced for you and the person struggling with the disorder. So I would always say it's going to be it's a rough road, especially depending on the capacity you are in their life. Like if you're a partner and you're living with them every single day, it's going to be hard, versus like, if you have a parent that you may see once a week, or a friend that you see once a month. So if you have someone more intimately into your life like that, just have a lot of patience. Do a lot of self-care for yourself. Look up bipolarity, just look up some facts on your own from like very credible medical prescribed sites that can really help you kind of see from our perspective, because sometimes it's hard for people who have this disorder to describe what's going on with them, especially in those moments.
Yeah, and I can really, I can feel that it would be quite yeah, if you're already in the emotion, if your nervous system is already going crazy, you can't really like in a grounded way express what you need. So I guess pre-framing and having a pre-conversations is so important, because then you know what to expect, then you know what to do, then you have a safe word, and then you can really like
Right.
navigate the situation. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
I'm so curious about this, because it's like, yeah, bipolarity here and there, people hear about it, but no one really talks about it that much. So I'm just so excited to talk about it. And I'm also curious, like, have you noticed yourself having this kind of, let's say, state, or emotional, let's say, imbalance already in your young age, or did it start like later in your life, or how did you, yeah, that, like, how did it feel for you? Did it develop somehow? Did it grow? The more emotions or the more stress did you have, or was
Hmm.
it something that you inherently had like in childhood, and or maybe even since you were born, you were just more sensitive to it? Like, how does it work?
So I was definitely, I can remember as early as 9 struggling with my mental health. I remember just feeling unbalanced emotionally. I struggled a lot to connect with my classmates, just because I was sometimes a little bit more introverted. And at the same time, I was going through a lot at home with just my own trauma and seeing these kind of behaviors mimicked from my parents and thinking that was normal. So I came from a very high stress, as the only child, being the emotional support animal for my mom and kind of being the brunt of my dad's anger has definitely contributed to the emotional imbalance that I had as a child and grew up with. I definitely noticed that it got worse once I got to college. Right when I graduated high school, you get into the real world and you realize that you have all these responsibilities and things that you didn't expect because you're a teenager still, but you're also an adult. And so I definitely noticed it peaked more once I went to college. So that's why I wasn't necessarily diagnosed until I was 24, and done with school. But I definitely knew beforehand, especially between 20 to 24, that something was really going on and I was either going to get a handle on it or I wasn't.
Hmm. Well,
So,
that's good
yeah.
to know, because then it
Yeah,
really, it seems like it stems from, yeah, childhood, and then it develops, and then it can grow when you have more stress, because obviously if you are on, yeah, you have so much responsibility, you can be
absolutely.
overwhelmed with the amount of things you need to do and take care of and so on. So yeah, it's good to know.
Hmm.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I also am curious about this borderline personality disorder, because I've heard, of course, the name before, but I don't really know what
Yes,
it is. So I would love to know,
right.
yeah, the I don't know, the
So,
behaviors that it brings, or
right.
whatever.
Okay, of course. So it's fairly new for me as well because I recently got diagnosed with it. But from my understanding, from just being in therapy, I would share my symptoms of feeling abandoned a lot or being afraid of being abandoned, struggling with kind of like writing people off too easily. So, like, how I think the term is ghosting when you make a new friend, and if they have something that doesn't align with what you believe in, or whatever it could be. It could be something as silly as I like blue, and they're like, I don't like blue, and you just ghost them. People who have borderline personality disorder tend to have a stronger inclination to things like that. So for me personally, I struggle with feeling abandoned, even if I'm not. And that stems from childhood. It's more so, borderline is more so from my childhood that never got healed, that is still being worked on, but shows up in different ways when I am under a lot of stress. Versus my bipolarity, that is more so and could be more genetic, but more so from just an issue of my mood and regulation. And so I kind of, going back to the labels, I think it just gives me a better understanding of what's going on and things that I can take to help support and regulate my brain while I'm healing. But I don't necessarily think that it's something that, I mean, it's pretty common. The symptoms of borderline are things that we all struggle with. We all want to be connected. We all want to have a community. We want to have a village. And so if that's the case, then everyone in the world has borderline personality disorder, because the
Exactly.
symptoms are very, very vague and very basic and things that you might even experience feeling every single day. It's just something, that another one of those things that's like, okay, This is how my brain works based on the experiences and things that I have gone through and things that have happened to me. Now what can I do? And it just goes back to managing, eating well, exercising, meditating, repeating those affirmations to yourself of what you know to be true, and just really truly living that out.
Yeah, it seems like you're right that most of the people have this disorder, let's say, because like I have abandonment wound as well since childhood, and I've been healing it for the last few years, and I feel quite okay now. But in the past, I could I don't know, I could cry because my boyfriend just went out of the room while we had some kind of conflict going on, and then I would like go into my
Yes,
full on crying and trauma and so on. But it's normal, like it just stems from childhood experiences. I don't think it's like anything weird, and I
exactly.
feel honestly, I feel like most of us have kind of abandonment wound because even first day at school, or if someone was in an incubator, or maybe the first time that we were left with a nanny or whatever, like everyone has some kind of abandonment wound inside of us. So it seems to me like this is even a more
Yes.
bullshit label than bipolarity. I'm sorry to say, but seriously, it's
Yes.
like it seems like, yeah, you
Yes.
have this, you have fear of abandonment, you have this, but like everyone does. So
Yes.
I mean, maybe the
I think,
intensity varies
oh,
again, but you
yeah.
know.
I think also too, it's just a reminder that like you can stay with this label or this definition and do nothing about it and just say, well, I have borderline personality or I have bipolar disorder, so that's what's wrong with me. Or you can take it and say, well, I got diagnosed because I was showing certain symptoms, so what can I do about these symptoms other than taking medication to help regulate? What can I do naturally or holistically to help me truly heal and move forward? And then see if you go back in a year and talk to your therapist and see if you have the same diagnosis. I would, like to believe that maybe you wouldn't, because you may not be showing symptoms or signs of it anymore because you put in the work and focused on what needed to be worked on versus just saying, oh well, I have this and there's nothing I can do, because that's not true.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm. Yes, I totally vibe with everything that you're saying. That's so cool. And I'm really curious, because you said that sometimes you took medication, did it actually help?
It did help when I was under high stress. So, like being a mom and having a toddler alone is high stress. But because they're little and they don't know how to emotionally regulate, and that's our job as parents to teach them how to be able to emotionally regulate themselves. And I was like, okay, how can I teach her and myself at the same time? And it became a little overwhelming. So I did take medication for a couple months to just help myself be balanced while I was trying to navigate how I could truly work on myself. And then once I got, my own safety plan, I just decided that I was ready to get off. And I told my psychiatrist, I'm ready to get off. I think I have taken the medication for its course and I'm ready to just kind of do things on my own. And, on my own being what I had been doing just without medication. And I feel great. It definitely helped regulate my brain. And if I need it again, I have no shame in taking it again. But I do prefer to do things without taking medication as much as possible.
Mm-hmm. And so, how did it work? Like, how did you feel when you have taken it? Did it just like calm you down, or?
I did. I felt so much calmer. I felt I was able to better focus naturally versus, taking like a something that may not be as safe, or along the lines of something that I wouldn't recommend that may even be illegal. I believe in, definitely following the prescription and taking it as prescribed, and it helped me so much with whenever I felt overwhelmed or irritable or those abandonment thoughts came up. I was able to just come back down easier from it, and I was able to move around my day without feeling that depression of that bolted me to my chair, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I also feel like, of course, there are medications that maybe are not helpful, but there surely are also the ones that are helpful. And also, it depends on the stage that you're in, because sometimes taking medication
Exactly.
and actually numbing something is better rather than trying to do everything holistically and just on your own when your nervous system is so all over the place that you're not even able to handle yourself. So I also am not against it, although if my
Right.
preference is also the holistic healing and the natural and herbs and
Yes.
meditation and yoga and so on, right? But sometimes I know that there are situations that it's actually like the last resort for a person to do it for some time, and then when they are ready they can go on with their life and be more holistic. And so I'm totally with you on that, that sometimes it is necessary and it's the best way to go about something. So yeah, it's good to know that it has helped you on the journey, and it's also good to know that you stopped taking it, because I truly believe in the power of our own body to heal. And once it is ready for that, then you can step up and just heal yourself. So that's really really great. I'm really happy that you are on this journey of empowerment and self-healing. This is really really great and awesome. So I have actually the last question about this mental health, let's say, area. What do you feel like is the misconception, the biggest like misconception, the myth about mental health that is like going on, around the globe, let's say, that is completely like not true from your perspective, something that you've discovered, like, oh, actually people said it's like this, but actually it's not fully there.
I think that the one thing, a lot of people think that when you hear these diagnoses for mental health, it's a lot more extreme than it is. I've learned that the depiction in social media and movies is just not reality, but a lot of us think that it is. And so you don't think anything is necessarily wrong with you because you're not showing signs like that. Or you think, okay, it's going to get there because I have this diagnosis now. And that's just not true. Everyone is different. You are your own person. I have bipolar 2, another person could have bipolar 2 and show even, more increased symptoms than myself because we're two different people. And that's okay. We're both responsible for getting the help that we need and taking the time that is necessary to heal and keep going and manage this disorder. But I think that it's important to know that the extremeness is just a stigma. Honestly, there are moments in any diagnosis where it could be extremely dangerous, or it could turn if you haven't been mindful of your safety plan or putting in the work. Then yeah, but it's honestly, like we talked about earlier, things that everyone experience and deal with. And so it's honestly just another part of taking care of yourself, like you would a wound on your arm or a broken bone. It's just like you take care of your physical health, you need to take care of your mental health. And I think that's something that you should just always keep in mind. How am I doing up here and how am I doing with my full body? It has to be aligned.
Absolutely. And it's an advice to everyone, really. Like, whether you're diagnosed with something or not, like, everyone should take care of their mental health. And it's kind of like, okay, you brush your teeth, you take care of your physical body, you wash yourself. Then you also need to clear your mind and actually, like,
Exactly.
see what is there. Like, how am I feeling? What can I focus on to feel better? How can I manage my energy to not be distorted in so many different ways and to not get overwhelmed? I feel like it's really about every single person in this world that they should take care of it. So yeah, that's great. That's really great. And about this safety, because I this safety plan, I'm really curious to know, like, what are the, let's say, elements of the safety plan that people can use in a way, like you said, you mentioned the safe word, let's say, like a code, like a code word. But what else? For example, would breathing with someone help, or would, let's say, like, what would help the most based on your experience?
So for me, I know in my safety plan, I go through different things to help myself de-escalate when I have an episode. So that always includes affirmations, repeating things that I know to be true to myself. Then it might transition into mindfulness or mindful breathing, especially if I'm by myself. I try to do things that I know will help regulate myself when I'm alone. But also, important factor of the safety plan, whether you're by yourself or not, is to have someone around that can really remind you and just be mindful and help keep you safe so that you don't fare into those channels of potentially self-harming yourself or harming someone else. So I would always recommend, if you're home with someone or wherever you are, to just say, hey, whatever your word is, whether it's pineapples or whether it's lemon, so that they know, hey, I'm feeling I'm feeling off right now and I'm not sure what's going on. I just want to make you aware. Can you help support me? And if you're by yourself, I highly recommend either texting or calling someone immediately that you trust and know will be there as a support. Just to, talk on the phone or vent or say, hey, I don't know what's going on, but I feel my mind or I feel a shift. Can I have a conversation with you right now? If those people aren't available, then of course I always recommend calling 911 or taking yourself to the nearest urgent care or emergency room so that you can be evaluated and that you can just honestly talk with whoever's on staff or on call. There's always someone available, whether it's a psychiatrist, therapist, or doctor, to just say, I'm feeling uneasy, I'm feeling off, or I'm not really sure what to do. Can you help me? And that, of course, is like the most extreme, at the end of your plan, after you've tried all the other steps from mindful breathing, or sometimes I even like to color whatever it is that you do normally that helps relax you. That needs to be a part of your plan. So for me, it's the mindfulness, it's the affirmations, I do coloring of mandalas. Sometimes because I am a parent, so sometimes I have moments where I'm feeling my brain shifting and I'm at home with my daughter, so I'll just pull out some, paper for her to color with me and I'll just do a mandala for 15 minutes. And sometimes I forget that I was even feeling that way. Versus sometimes when it's a little bit more extreme and I tell my husband, hey, can you either take our daughter, to the park or something so I can just have a moment to myself, or do you mind sitting with me? Because I think I need some comfort. I need, some physical touch. I need a hug, whatever it is. Just being vocal. Don't be afraid to speak up. That is a part of the safety plan. Don't keep it to yourself. Do not suppress it, because that's not going to help. And you might have already been to a moment where, okay, being quiet and not saying anything and not speaking up is not helping. So what should I do now? It's really easy though, but always when you have a plan in place and you know what the word is, have it as a file on your phone and with the person that is your support person, so that they can remember, okay, she just said lemon. That means she's feeling, sad, or she's feeling down. She said pineapples. She feels like she's in danger or she's going to do something. And that'll prompt them to come in as your support.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing all that. I feel like I have so much more wisdom now about this state. I really
Thank
value it
you.
because I'm super curious about mental health in general. I love the human mind and psyche and knowing everything about it. So thank you so
Yeah.
much for sharing all that. And I have one last little question to you. If someone would like to see your content and know more about you, what's the best way to find you?
Oh, of course. You can follow me on Instagram at Karla with a K said hello. So Karla said hello, or you can go to karlasaidhello.com
Oh,
and check
perfect.
out my
Thank you
site.
so, so much. Thank you so much
Of
for all
course.
your wisdom and experience and knowledge that you share with us. I feel like it's such an important topic to talk about mental health in general, but also all these different things that we have inside of us and how to deal with them. So thank you so much. Seriously, I'm super grateful to
Of
you.
course. And thank you. And thank you for your platform and allowing me to be on it and talk about these things with you.